Good morning, good afternoon, or good night, and welcome to Command Power, the show in which we discuss all things Magic the Gathering with a focus on Commander. And today we have a brand new deck for you, and just as a quick heads up, this is not a budget deck, although I do think it should be fairly easy to find substitutes for those expensive cards. But before we do that, just a quick reminder to please click subscribe if you enjoy my videos. I'm currently growing the channel and I'm getting very close to 1,000 subscribers, so it would mean the world to me if you could support me. And today we're going to be doing a very special episode of our deck techs, and I'm going to be talking about Ashling the Pilgrim, which was the first commander that I ever made. If you don't know what Ashling the Pilgrim does, for 1 color less and 1 red, she's a legendary creature, elemental shaman, 1/1 with 1 color less and 1 red. Put a +1/+1 counter on Ashling the Pilgrim. If this is the 3rd time this ability has resolved this turn, remove all +1/+1 counters from Ashling the Pilgrim, and it deals that much damage to each creature and each player. So the reason I really loved this commander back in the day was that it was cheap and there weren't that many mono red options available at the time, to be honest. This was a great one. It allowed for lots of different kind of build arounds and lots of effective strategies to be utilized. Basically, you have a commander that is guaranteed to have a board wipe if you can keep her alive for enough turns so that she can gradually grow. If you were to use her immediately as she came down and tried to explode her so that she could wipe the board, you would only be dealing 3 damage to each creature and each player, which is probably not enough to wipe most boards. But that's where some of the other shenanigans come in. We have a bunch of ways to give Ashling Death Touch, and I also used to have a bunch of ways to give her Lifelink. So I've upgraded the deck a little bit since then. I've put in a bunch of creatures that want to be dealt damage, so that's going to be pretty nice with her. Then I've also included a bunch of ways to give our creatures protection and indestructible, which are all very nice, obviously, with Ashling. But I just love the core gameplay here. You've basically got this ticking time bomb that people can't really afford to ignore. So they're going to have to either try to remove it or just kind of not play into it. But if they don't play any creatures into it, they're eventually going to die to direct damage from this. So it's a very interesting kind of gameplay. It can be a little bit oppressive sometimes. If you get really far ahead, it can be very hard for opponents to catch up because you can just keep threatening to blow her up all the time, and as long as you leave enough mana open, you're going to be able to do so whenever you want. It is crucial that the ability happens when the ability resolves and not when it's activated, so that does give your opponents a little bit of time for counterplay, which is nice. But yeah, I'm really excited to present this list to you. This is very close to my heart, so without further ado, let's get started. And we're getting started with Agitator Ant. This was obviously not in the original list, and it's a very cool card in this deck because it works so well with Ashling. We can put 2 +1/+1 counters on her, thus growing her for when she eventually blows up. That's really nice, and obviously this is a card that is already close to playable in most red decks, so it's pretty good. Anti-Blight, Bad Influence synergizes with quite a few things in the deck. We have to find a way to give her protection or to give her indestructible, otherwise Ashling's going to blow her up with her. But if we do manage to keep her alive, then this can grow absolutely huge because we're going to be taking a lot of damage from Ashling ourselves. Brash Taunter is one of the ways that we're going to transform that Ashling damage into damage to our opponents. It works really nicely in this deck. Drillworks Mole is one of the weaker cards in the deck, but it's just so fun, and we make so much mana that we should be able to sink some into this. So this is going to work really nicely by growing Ashling as it grows itself. Godo Bandit Warlord is there to search up any of our utility equipment. We have a ton of them in this deck. We're not running the infinite combo with it and Helm of the Host, but if you wanted to, it'd be a great addition so you can just finish the game in one go. Heartless Hidetsugu is going to work really well in a deck that's trying to deal this much direct damage, and since we have a bunch of ways to give lifelink, this can actually gain us a ton of life. Horde Smelter Dragon is one that was in my original deck list back in the day, and I have a soft spot for this. It's not the best card these days, and it's been outclassed by a lot of different things, but having repeatable artifact removal that can also dish out a ton of damage seems pretty good to me. Ill-Tempered Loner is another version of Brash Taunter, which we definitely want in this deck. If for whatever reason we ever get to flip it, it becomes absolutely nuts, and we should be able to win the game very, very easily. Imperial Recruiter is a new addition. I didn't have this back in the day because it was too expensive, but it's now very affordable, so I put it in here so that we can search a lot of our different utility creatures. It's very nice in this deck. Leyline Tyrant is going to make sure that all of that mana that we're creating doesn't get lost. We've got quite a few different ways to make mana, but it kind of just sticks sticks around for a short while. With this, we can keep it for as long as we need it, and we can even dump it all into someone's face if this actually gets removed. Obsidian Fireheart was another one that has been here since the very start. It's another card that I have a soft spot for. It's just a very, very slow and grindy way to finish the game, but we have so many ways to pay mana in this deck that it's going to be good. Quicksmith Genius is great to give us some card selection. It's not always very easy to do in red, so this can actually give us a nice amount of selection with all the artifacts we have. Solemn Simulacrum is a classic staple of Commander. It's been in there from the start. Ramp and card draw are still good. Sulfur Mayhem Dominance gets absolutely insane with Ashling. We're obviously very rarely going to make it indestructible, but we do have a few ways that it can survive with equipment. Soul of New Phyrexia is a great way to protect our board for when Ashling explodes. Steel Hellkite is great removal in mono red because we don't have that many ways to deal with our opponent's stuff. This is going to allow us to do so. Stuffy Doll is another effect that wants to be dealt damage. Again, it works really well with Ashling. Thran Spider is going to give us a nice little bit of mana. We have a lot of activated abilities and a lot of artifacts, so the Power Stone is actually really good. It also comes with its own little mana sink, which can be really good to find some cards. Torov, God of Fury is an excellent way to finish the game when we have an Ashling out with a ton of counters on her, because it's suddenly going to deal so much damage to our opponents. And Vyashino Heretic is one that I've had in here from the start. It's going to deal direct damage and destroy artifacts repeatedly. Those are both pretty good things for a red deck to do. Moving on, we have artifacts. Basilisk Collar is perfect in this deck because we want Ashling to have both Lifelink and Death Touch so that she doesn't need to have too many counters for us to destroy everything. Battleskull gives Lifelink and Vigilance. Those are both abilities that are very good on Ashling because when she's really big, being able to keep her back on defense and swing is kind of good. Blazing Sunsteel is going to be really good in this deck by giving us an additional Ashling trigger whenever she pops. Cage Sun is going to work really well by giving us a bunch of extra mana and pumping our creatures. Darksteel Plate is one of the ways we're going to make our things indestructible, particularly Ashling if we need her to. Endless Atlas is a great way to draw cards in mono red. Gauntlet of Power is just like Cage Sun, except it's slightly worse because it can also help our opponents sometimes. Gorgon's Head is going to give Death Touch for Ashling. Hammer of Nazan is great because it's not only going to give a creature indestructible, it's also going to allow us to attach equipment for free, which is very nice. Hearthstone works really well with all of our activated abilities on creatures. It's particularly good with Ashling because she then costs only 1 red mana to pump. Loxodon Warhammer serves 2 really good purposes. Giving Lifelink is excellent, but Trample on a really big Ashling or Anti-Blight can also be great. Network Terminal is a bit of ramp that can also serve for a bit of card selection, which is nice to have. Scythe of the Wretched is a really cool old card that's going to let us steal everything that we kill with Ashling when she blows up, which is absolutely awesome. Shadow Spear can make sure our opponents don't hide behind Indestructible or Hexproof, and it's also going to give Trample and Lifelink, so it just fits perfectly in this deck. Skull Clamp is a great way to draw some cards when our creatures die. We don't have that many 1 toughness creatures, but there's just such few ways to draw cards in red that this is still going to make the cut. Swiftfoot Boots is going to give some nice protection to Ashling, and it also means that some of our bigger creatures can attack immediately. Sword of Forge and Frontier is a new addition. I haven't really tried this one yet, but it looks pretty good to me. It gives us some card selection and card advantage, and giving protection from red is something that we really want because then our creature that's equipped with this will not die to Ashling. Sword of Sinew and Steel is also there mostly for the protection, but being able to destroy an artifact and occasionally a planeswalker is pretty solid. And the same thing with Sword of War and Peace. Protection is great, gaining some life and dealing some direct damage are also just gravy on top. Sword of the Animist is going to make sure that we hit our land drop so that we can pump Ashling. That's pretty nice to have. Moving on, we have our enchantments. Braid of Fire is one of the spiciest ones in the deck. This is going to work so well with Ashling because we can dump all the mana it makes into her abilities or any of our other activated abilities, so it's very rarely going to go to waste. City on Fire is going to be excellent with Ashling and all of our deck, really. The only issue is getting it down early enough, but we have enough creatures to tap that it should be alright. Pertussis Violence is going to double all of our creature damage, but it's also going to double all of Ashling's damage. And this also works really well with all of our creatures that trigger off of taking damage. The Brothers War fits so perfectly in this deck. Getting 2 Power Stone tokens is excellent in a deck with this many artifacts and activated abilities. Forcing 2 opponents to attack each other is really great, and then dealing a ton of damage to 2 targets equal to the number of artifacts we control is going to help us finish the game. Underworld Breach is one of the best mono red cards in Commander, and it's going to allow us to have a little bit of late game recursion. And Visions of Phyrexia fits so perfectly again in this deck because we really like Power Stones, and it's either card advantage or ramp, which we're happy with. For instance, we have Bolt Bend to protect Ashling. This should almost always be online for 1 mana, which is great. Chaos Warp and Wild Magic Surge are going to let us deal with most of our problem permanents. Fill of Possibility is a way to get some cards by discarding something we don't need. Tybalt's Trickery is the only way red has to really interact on the stack like a counter spell, so that's great to have. And Will's Reversal is similar to Bolt Bend and Tybalt's Trickery, except it can also hit abilities, which is great. For sorceries, we have Chandra's Ignition, which is an excellent way to end a game when your commander gets as big as Ashling should be getting. Faithless Looting is one of the best red cards to get a little bit of card selection. Reforge the Soul is going to allow us to fill up our hand and occasionally mess with our opponents. And Vandal Blast is a great piece of removal for all of those artifacts that your opponents might have lying around. As for Planeswalkers, we have Daretti Scrap Savant, which is going to give us card selection, and it's also going to recur artifacts that we need recurring. Karn Living Legacy is going to give us Power Stone tokens, which amounts to almost unconditional ramp in this deck, and then it also has a great way to draw cards as a -1, and if we ever get the ultimate, we should be winning the game. Kothfire Resistance is one of my favorite Planeswalkers from All Will Be One, so I'm really excited to finally put it in a deck and see how it plays. And finally for battles, we have Invasion of Kaldheim, which is an excellent card, advantage card in red, which is pretty rare to say. It's basically going to double your hand, so it's not as good to top deck on an empty hand, but when you have any sort of hand, this becomes great. And then the other side is fantastic because we're going to be able to turn all of our lands into real cards and then deal damage to our opponents. It also has a little bit of synergy with some other cards in the deck if we needed to that allow us to loot, so it works really well in this deck. As for lands, we have Inventor's Fair, which is going to gain us a nice little bit of life and is also going to allow us to search for an artifact. Rogue's Passage can let us finish some games if we get to sneak Ashling through. Spine Rock Null should be very easy to trigger in a deck with this much direct damage. Valakut the Molten Pinnacle is a classic that I've had in this deck since its early days. This just deals a lot of damage when you need it to. War Room is going to draw some cards for very little investment, and Witch's Clinic can gain us a lot of life in crucial moments by giving Ashling lifelink. So there you have it. That has been our Ashling the Pilgrim deck. This has given me some serious pangs of nostalgia, and I'm definitely going to throw this back together. Do let me know in the comment section below if there is any commander from March of the Machine that you would like me to do a deck on next. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click like or subscribe. It really helps the channel. And until next time, take care.